Welcome to the Influencer Marketing Blueprint, where we teach e-commerce brands the three-step formula that drives revenue, not just likes. I'm Cody Whittick.
And I'm Taylor Lagasse, and we're here to guide you to influencer marketing success. Let's get started. All right, are we just diving in?
Yeah.
C-Dub, let's get it rocking. Tell me a little bit more about your background and what led you to the kinship waters, the well of life.
That's right. Background. So previously to starting kinship with yourself, I was at a brand called QALO, running the influence marketing program for about 4 to 5 years. And before that, I was just a nomad traveling the world homeless. Before that,
You were a knife seller.
I was in school. Yeah, before that, selling Cutco like every good entrepreneur out there once sold knives.
You got to learn how to sell.
So, yep. And then before that, I don't know. I was a wee young lad growing up in the parents' household.
Well, tell me a little bit more about your experience at QALO and what is QALO.
Yeah. So QALO, silicone wedding rings, created that industry. They went from 0 to 40 million in 3 to 4 years, something like that. When I first joined, they had gone from 1 employee to 40 in a year. And I forget what number I was, but I was in the teens or something. But when I first started, I actually had nothing to do on the marketing team. I was packing rings. Casey Holiday, who was my connection there, family friend, who's also the brother of Taylor Holiday, who you worked for, that started Common Thread. Casey was my in, but he kind of grandfathered me in, but he made me earn it for a bit. So I was actually literally doing quality control on the actual rings that they were selling. So like using scissors and trimming the rings and packing them in their different like poly bags and stuff like that. So bottom of the totem pole, but like 4 months in, 4 or 5 months in, after I guess I earned it, I sat down with Casey and was just looking like, hey, I want to either get into marketing or sales. Like, is there a role that I could potentially enter into? And that role was basically working under Jordan Palmer, who we both know very well. And he was at that time. So there's a lot of context here. At that time, Common Thread Collective was called the Arch Network, and they were basically QALO's marketing team. So Taylor was like the CMO of QALO, and they used QALO to grow themselves, and also QALO used great minds to grow it as well. So Jordan was doing the influencer marketing. Jordan Palmer is the brother of Carson Palmer, played in the NFL for a long time, and then now he's the quarterback guru, with definitely a name for himself, that's for sure. He had played in the league 7 to 8 years by himself as well, so he had a lot of connections, and he was instrumental in getting QALO into NFL locker rooms and just making connections. The guy's knows agents and knows how to get to people, and so that was basically my first intro into really what I don't even think influencer was a word back then. It was just, we called them ambassadors, and seeding that's where I first learned what seeding was. Jordan told me about it, and that was basically what I did, was just literally Twitter DMing athletes, minor league baseball, like just going into other categories that Jordan necessarily didn't have connections in, and was DMing them and just looking to send them as much product as possible. Obviously, because the rings are 2 cents on the dollar, so we could afford to send out just so many of them. So that was long-winded, but that was a lot of context of when I first got connected with QALO and what I was first doing with them.
It's so funny, all the different terminologies. because my first touch point with the word seeding was from Jordan Palmer at Common Thread Collective as well, with Theraguns and seeding out Theraguns, where it's a little bit more costly than a silicone wedding ring. But at Athletes First, we called them locker room
Yeah.
drops, or just mass seating like locker rooms. But what is seating? What are locker room drops? What does that mean? And what you were doing?
Yeah, all it means is just sending out product for free. You're not charging or making the influencer or potential influencer pay for it. So that's literally the definition.
And at QALO, you know, as a brand owner potentially listening in on this, they might be thinking like, why would I send my ring out or my product out, no strings attached, with no expectation of them to do anything? Like, what did you actually see come from that? What did it blossom into?
Oh gosh. I mean, relationships and eventual partnerships with macros such as Dale Earnhardt Jr. and Bryce Harper and Steph Curry all started with seeding. So let alone those big names. And then also just the people that you've never heard of that promoted it, talked about it. The idea was basically we wanted seating, especially with a silicone wedding ring and like something that you could see everywhere. People are wearing it constantly, or at least they should be. Is that we wanted it everywhere, and it was a novel product, and so we just wanted it to be seen by everybody in the locker room, or just whether they're posting about it or not, like they're going to be talking about it. And so get
Mm.
this thing everywhere. And that was like my first, like basically project goal, like get this everywhere, get this to every major sport, minor leaguers, like the people that you don't know that will eventually be big stars. um, that was, I can't think of, there were people, I should probably think about that right now. There were people that like turned into bigger stars after the fact, that we didn't
Mm.
know at the time, that we were just like sending product. um, there's for sure some of those that I want to say in Major League Baseball that became big. I mean, even Bryce Harper too was like uh, a MVP, but before that, we were seeding him product too. Um, so yeah, it was just get the
Well,
product to as many people as possible.
to backtrack to one of your initial points, you were saying seeding lended itself to, developing relationships and ultimately partnerships with Dale Earnhardt Jr., Steph Curry. LeBron James had the ring on when he signed with the
Yeah.
Lakers. You know, why not? How do you think those relationships would have panned out if you just tried to engage them right away in a paid upfront partnership in comparison to starting the relationship with seeding? Why do you like what would the difference be, do you think?
Increased rates, um,
Hmm.
just immediately. I don't know how much of a discount there is, but
Massive.
I do know that there
Massive.
is one for sure. So for instance, like Dale Earnhardt Jr. negotiations, yeah, I've been sending him product for a year, at least 2 years. All kinds of different rings, checking in before we ever started. Like, hey, let's make you a flag bearer of our brand. Um, those negotiations started at $500,000, and we ended up working for 200,000. Um,
Come on.
but but yeah, I wonder what those prices. That would probably be a million, if I had to guess. If like Dale never heard of the product before, like it
For sure.
significantly helps when you have a macro going to their agent and saying, "Hey, I want to work with these guys. I love the product," versus like agent approaching player and saying, "Hey, we have this deal for you. It's some watch brand. Like they want to offer this." Um, now maybe it's
Right.
they're gonna pay them stupid money so that they take it, and that happens all the time. But I just think
Right.
you had your bet by seeding and building a relationship the right way, because every brand wants the person that authentically loved the product. Uh, Everyone admits that. They
Right.
just don't want to take the time and actually building the relationship the right way, which we would say is doing it through seeding. So that's really like really quickly, I just saw the power of seeding, and um, that's why I've always been such a huge believer in it. It was just like I've seen this time and time again with athletes and influencers, and like it turned into macro deals and it turned into micros, and um, it's just the foundations. You gotta do it to some degree. Obviously, not everyone can afford QALO.
For sure.
Like, it doesn't have the margins that QALO did or the low cogs. But sometimes that's, yeah, sometimes that's a negative as well. Like if your cogs are so low, that means your price point's so low, like potentially, and it's not attractive enough. But what QALO had was it's a meaningful product, right? Like it's something really meaningful, like a wedding ring. So yeah,
It's good. And I also just want to affirm the logic too, of brand, agent, player dynamics there. If a brand is looking to work with a player and the player has never heard of that brand and the agent's trying to like get him to work with that brand, even though he's never heard of it, you're going to get the hyped up, inflated rate that probably doesn't make sense. If you are a brand that that player knows of and wants to work with and appreciates, which can very easily happen from seeding, you're going to get, I would always say you're probably getting 50% off. And those conversations are happening that way where the player is like, no, I want to work with them. I'm willing to do it for less. Those types of
right,
texts happen all the time in the background when brands came in and try to work with
right.
them. So 100% correct there.
It's leverage, right? It's just like and you need leverage with when dealing with agents. There's
For
like,
sure.
I built a good network of agents at QALO, and there's definitely some rough ones, but for the most part, like they're all nice people. They're good people, even though it kind of is like has a negative connotation. And we spoke about this last time. The nature of the industry can be uh, pretty scammy a little bit, but there's definitely some good agents out there that like really mean well and want to do good right by like their clients and the athletes they represent. Um, but it is leverage, so like you definitely do need that for sure, with negotiations.
Yeah. And you hit it on the nail of the head there. I would say they have the best interests of the players in mind. A lot of the time, not as much so the brands, but if you do have good relationships with the players and the player enjoys your brand, you're going to get that rate cut in half without a
Right,
doubt. But always keep in mind though, based on the last episode too, these people are incentivized to take care of their clients first, your brand
totally, and
second.
as they should, right?
Um,
I mean, they don't, they're
100%.
getting hit up by so many brands, or they're doing outreach themselves, putting money on the table for their
100%.
family. So that's why it's an interesting space.
So another question that comes to mind with seeding, completely understand the logic around you want to get your product in everybody's hands. You want this thing to be everywhere. You want people to be organically posting about it constantly, putting out content, creating content. But how do you actually see if that's happening? At QALO, how did you get a gauge of is this working? That's something that I always struggled with prior to what we do here at Kinship. But at QALO, like, how did you see the impact of these efforts come to life?
I mean, it was before all these tools out there. So, I mean, Instagram story downloader and like my self tracking. But we could go into a huge rabbit hole of like me,
Like I was
me
hustling.
myself, like doing all of that. Like, and I would put our social person on it as well to start tracking as well, just kind of be monitoring those things. But monitoring the minor leaguer with 5,000 followers, like we're not doing that. But especially the macros, and we were doing a lot of macro work, so it was kind of easy to see like if and when they posted or
Right.
mentions that would come through that we would know about.
Well, and it's probably like a massive adrenaline rush.
For sure. Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Massive adrenaline rush if like Bryce Harper posted when you send it to him.
Yeah. And I got addicted to that for sure. Um, but yeah, I mean, there was no way of doing like what we would use now, which is Mighty Scout, where it's literally just like pulling in. Like there's none of that. So The one, and also the advantage, what I mentioned earlier, is like it's something that you see clearly. Like Steph Curry on the Warriors championship parade, he's holding up the trophy and like the ring, like his silicone ring is right there. Or when Zach Ertz for the Eagles is like holding the Super Bowl trophy, getting interviewed by ESPN, he's like holding it and it's like ring right there. Like it's such a unique, different thing as opposed to him wearing a Lululemon shirt underneath his jersey. Like you just don't know. Like, and there's so many different brands. So the uniqueness of the product and like for it to be clearly visibly seen, and because like there's other competitors out there and like knockoff brands and stuff like that, but like that was another thing too, is just that's why we were doing seating more than anybody, was just trying to make sure that like we were the name that if they were thinking of like wearing a silicone wedding ring or wanting that, it was QALO. And oh, I've seen that around, I've seen that in the locker room, I've seen that on social, like, oh, my boy's wearing it, things of that nature. So it's kind of a combo, but
Yeah. And I remember, and I just know this obviously because you're my partner, but a strong example that always stood out to me from your QALO experience was when you compare and contrast Brittany Aldean activation in comparison to Bryce Harper activation. And what do you feel like you came to understand from that experience? What did you take away from that? And honestly, just, articulate it here and now. What am I even talking about?
yeah. Well, common thread, your former gig was our digital agency. And so I was constantly had insights into, okay, these macro testimonials, these macro influencers are crushing it. So go get more. And so that's where like when you bring up like the Bryce versus Brittany, there used to be something called audience insights within Facebook, and you'd be able to see like based on your brand that you could see like there's all these things telling us that Major League Baseball and country music and those crossovers like worked really well. And so Bryce Harper, good looking, up and comer, one MVP, gonna be like, it was like him and Mike Trout were gonna be like the best ever to ever play, basically. Once again, seeded Bryce for a year or two. We ended up working on basically a one-off deal for him to do a testimonial or a couple other things in the contract. That deal was 30 grand. Probably would have been 100 if it was Bolt. So going back to your point, but so 30 grand. And then we also worked with Brittany Aldean, which early on when she was kind of just Jason Aldean's wife, like now she has her own like individual name. Still probably primarily, nothing against her, probably more so known as being Jason Aldean's wife, but we did like
That's great context.
We just did like Facebook Live with her and repurposed that content, and it crushed. And then there was that's
into Facebook ads.
Yeah. So it went Facebook Live,
Yeah.
and then we were able to like I don't know if people still do this, but you're able to like download and save it. So then we are actually able to like repurpose that content. So Bryce
with usage rights, people. With usage
Bryce
rights.
versus Brittany, and Brittany was with CEG, so we definitely had usage rights. That's another agency that represents that sort of industry. Bryce versus Brittany, I had all my eggs in like, I thought like Bryce was just gonna knock it out of the park, like 7 ROAS or something, and it ended up just tanking. Did not do well, and then Brittany's crushed. Like, I don't remember the exact numbers. I'd have to pull up like that thread, but I just know that they ran it for a while, and it did really well. And then also too, like there's a Jason like comes in to the Facebook Live as well later on, so that obviously helps. But yeah, we were getting creative, but it was all like, early on, like we were seeing such crazy numbers, and it's also within the Facebook heyday that seeding lended itself to. So it was like flow of like seeding, create the relationship, like, they love the product. Now approach them when we're talking just macros. Obviously, we're doing this with micros too as well. But when we're, when we're
course.
approaching macros, seeding, get them the product first, create a relationship if I didn't already have it with the agent. Now start, like, if we want to actually see if they're going to work well, let's do like a video testimonial. Let's do that. And then maybe explore, if that does well, explore like a bigger, more expansive partnership. So that was kind of like the flow. And, but what happened was just I got addicted to, like, and also it wasn't just my own decision, but like CTC's like really push for like more video testimonials for macros, based on evidence, based on like what had worked. But it was just, I think the whole company got addicted to Facebook and was on the Facebook drug. And then I was just constantly consumed with getting these macro video testimonials for us to leverage within Facebook. And some of them worked and a lot of them didn't. And like we were spending so much money. So that's what's kind of informed both of our philosophies on macros to date. But yeah.
For sure. For sure. But just to start at the Bryce versus Brittany thing, like, what do you think from that? Why do you think Brittany outperformed Bryce?
Well, the content from Bryce sucked. So it was like,
Right.
proof in the pudding is like, it doesn't matter who it is. Sometimes I guess I would be seen as if, I don't know. What I'm really trying to say is, like, if you had a massive name, maybe it doesn't matter, but still we would probably still say like it does matter. Like
For
I'm
sure.
thinking like a like Ronaldo or like LeBron James, or something like where it's like
Right.
macro
For
like
sure.
huge ass name. But yeah, Bryce's like video testimonial, I just remember being so monotone and just like, hey guys,
Just like
yeah, it's
cringy.
really cringy.
Ugh.
Even then I still thought it was gonna crush just because it's Bryce Harper and QALO, and
Right.
like this is how it works.
Right.
We get macros, they do testimonials, and it does well. Um, it was like too easy for a while. And then with Brittany, it wasn't even necessarily that her content was like super great, but it was like native to the feed, and it was a Facebook Live, so it's just like
Organic.
super chill. She brings in Jason. She was like pregnant at the time, so it's not like she's
Right.
like striving to be like professional.
Checks all the
Yeah, she's like
boxes.
pregnant, talking about, hey, here's all these rings that I love to wear, and also like Jason loves it. Oh, Jason, come over here, and like he just like pops his head in, and just like, yeah, I just love these rings. Like, it's just like it was just,
Super raw,
yeah.
organic.
So yeah, it was interesting.
I feel like it's such a good takeaway though. Like, and going back to my time at Athletes First, like you put these scripts in front of these guys. They're not influencers, and this is something we both have learned. They're not influencers because of their ability to create great content. They're influencers because they play a sport that garnered a following from
Right.
fans. So when you put a product in their hand and pay them to do something, Bryce Harper's basically reading off a script in the background, and it's not going to come off natural. Whereas Brittany Aldean obviously just crushed it. But then you also touched on something where you were constantly going after macros for testimonials. At what point do you feel like you realize maybe it's not even if we're going after if we're looking for testimonials and it's for creative to get repurposed into ads? Like, was there a time where at QALO you guys were just like, we can do this through micros as well, and it's going to perform all the same? Or did you guys not see that at QALO?
This goes down another rabbit hole, but I didn't have the time. Like, I was like, I could only do
Yeah.
seeding, like identify new people, and I was seeding like me as a person solely responsible for influencer marketing at that time, without tools, like no discovery tools. Like I was literally just on Instagram, like as the discovery tool, no like aggregation of the content. I was seeding like 30 to 50 people at most at a month basis, where like if I could go back, I would literally have like a person under me that was just seeding a minimum of 1,000 people minimum. And so
a
So I was
month?
only able to do seeding, and then therefore I was also only able to do like macro partnerships that like I needed to like contact these
Yeah,
agents, do negotiations and all this stuff. So like the stuff that was in between, I couldn't work with the 50,000 Instagram followers. Like, and we did sometimes like with certain launches, we would do like more micros with like pet influencers or like mommy bloggers and stuff like that. And
right.
so, but it was all still the pay for post model. Like it was all still like paying for posts. And yeah, sometimes we would get usage rights and leverage it, but I never saw micros. Um, we just never tested it because I didn't have the time. Like I couldn't do it. I couldn't do every level
That is a
of what we could do. So
that's a phenomenal thing you bring up though for brand owners listening in today. What's realistic if they were to hire internally out of a single person? Like, could they? Could they? I mean, you said hire one person underneath you if you could go back to seed 1,000, influencers per month. Is that even possible? Like, talk about what is realistic of a one-man team, because just doing 30 to 50 seating per month and contracting and all these macro influencers you've laid out, that seems like a hell of a lot of work. So what's actually realistic of this person, and what would you recommend to do if you are a brand trying to do this internally?
yeah, I mean, most of the time too, like for context, what we've come across is that if they do have one person, it's not one person, their sole job is influence marketing. It's like they do influencer and PR plus their like social most of the time. That's like the combo. And it might be even a third thing, like
Right.
working with their affiliates that are like bloggers and stuff like that. And it's like those three things. But sometimes like we come across people where it's like, yeah, I'm just trying to do this outreach. Plus, I'm like managing our email campaigns. And it's just, first of all, that for sure cannot happen. Um, so when we're saying like your question of like a like one person as a dedicated job is even still rare today. And even my point being is like I was that person and I could not do all of it. Now to be fair, like my last year at QALO, I had a $1 million influencer budget. Most brands are nowhere near like investing that amount of money, and we didn't spend all of it, but like that was my budget for the year because we were doing so many macro partnerships as well. Um,
Right.
but yeah, I would say that if you are gonna have one person, of course, I would recommend like just focus on seeding and focus on building the relationships and getting the product out there as much as possible for as much as you can afford, and let the cream rise to the top and work with the people that prove to be genuine advocates. Um, so I'd still start if you have one person, I would say realistically they can manage like one aspect of influencer marketing really at scale. Um, so I think most brands probably can't afford doing macro partnerships, even though they're constantly attracted to it and are teased by it. Um, they
Right.
shouldn't be focusing on that, as we've talked about for 2 episodes. um, and then yeah, so maybe seeding plus micro influencer, maybe ambassador or affiliate kind of management. Even then you're spread thin. So also at the time, go
Well,
ahead.
expand on that a little bit. I mean, you're talking about seeding 30 to 50 influencers in a month. Like, what's so hard about that? Aren't you just sending your product to 30 to 50 people? Can't you do that in a day? What's
Yeah,
what's the deal, Cody?
it's
What it?
easier. It is easier now because there's so many tools out there. So my 30 to 50, I could have done with a tool in the hundreds for sure. Just purely on identification, but like back because it was only 30 to 50, it was like Instagram drop down arrow, finding this person and then connecting with that person, and then like or like in a given month, like for the month of June, NFL training camp is coming up, so I'm gonna literally locker room drop all of our like connected to one player for all 32 teams. But that took up the whole month. Like I didn't do any other category besides that month. Um, so what's
Right.
time consuming about it is just the research and labor involved to identify people, and then the actual labor involved of DMing. And that was one pro back in the day,
Right.
that there was no limitations on DMs. over Instagram. But yeah. So
I was honestly teeing you up to slap that in the face, because I just don't feel like people actually think about, when people hear about seating 30 to 50 people, I don't think they actually digest the amount of steps that go into that and the amount of labor that go into it. I think people just think about, oh, I already know who the influencers are. I already know who the right influencers are who create great
yeah,
content. All that goes into identifying the right
right.
influencers, the entire message flow that goes into it, getting the product in their hands, unboxing experiences, everything A through Z. I just don't know if that registers for people. So I actually was teeing you up just to slap that idea in the face. Like, one person seeding 30 to 50 influencers a month takes a lot of work and a lot of effort. I just don't know if that's being realized on the other side.
It's true. It is it is a lot of work. And I've talked to, I mean, transparently, I've talked to Casey about it. Like, there's what you're asking me to do is just like impossible for, like, if not having a full team. I could only do big and then really small, like first step and then absolute last step, and there's like nothing in between to like actually make this a full on
Right.
like huge program. And yeah, so
That's quality.
right, yeah. And we had
Like, when you see, go
we
ahead.
had like 500 plus influencers that we were consistently seeding product to, plus, and it was constantly growing with new people, and then
It's
that's
insane.
plus our top 50 that we were sending out new product launches to, like kind of like our basically our top 50 biggest ambassadors that like loved us for sure. Um, so
Awesome.
Steph Curry was on that list, like constantly sending them new product launches, stuff like that. But all the way down to CrossFitters and stuff like that. So yeah, one person can't do it if you're really trying to make it like every level of the pyramid, which we would say seeding and content, organic plus affiliate plus paid, plus flag bearer, and like every step building up can't be one person.
Right.
It's just impossible.
Yeah. When I hear the role of like someone doing influencer marketing, they also do PR, they also do, whatever else they're doing. All that indicates, to me at least, is that they're not going about influencer marketing the right way. They can't be. It can't be a quality program being built out. They're just not taking their time finding the right people. They're probably paying a hiked up rate that gets put in front of them by a media kit. They're just getting whatever the influencer is willing to give. The posts aren't well thought out. Like, it just can't, with all that goes into it. And so my hope is, if brands do have someone wearing all these different hats and not fully dedicated influencer marketing, I just hope they're not taken away. Like, as if some of their influencer partnerships don't pan out, it's not because influencer marketing doesn't work for them. It's probably just because they need to
Yeah,
allocate way more resources towards
right.
this. So it's cool to hear of your experience at QALO for this as well, with someone fully dedicated to it and still not enough resources.
I say this all the time. It's more human than every other marketing channel. So it's just like, it's not like going into the Facebook dashboard and that dashboard will do whatever you tell it to do. You know what I mean? Like, in terms of setup and like pressing these buttons equals this and all this stuff, it's like you sending that email to the influencer doesn't get an automatic response, or it doesn't like do all these different things.
Right.
And that's just one aspect. There's just so much like human elements to it, of delays and negotiations and timeline, and it's yeah.
Zeroing out orders.
Oh my gosh.
We'll talk about that on another show, though.
Yeah.
But what would you say is your biggest takeaways going? This is going to be a little bit of a reflective question for you. Put you on the spot a little bit. Coming into kinship, before we partnered up together and do what we do now and the way that we do things, what would you say the biggest takeaways you had from your QALO experience? Yeah, from influencer marketing into what we do today.
I would say number one was we need to figure out. I don't even know if I ever even communicated this, but it was just like an internal thought, if it wasn't communicated, of just how does seeding do with as a service for clients? I was always just like intrigued about that. I think I told you the other day, I found like one of our first few months of kinship, like there's like an email out to this like coffee brand and saying we would like seed 10 influencers a month or something like that. And it was just funny. But yeah, so I was really interested in like, because I knew the power of it. I just didn't know like how it all look. Like, how is this going to be effective? And also, too, was just macros. I don't want to do the macro game. I was exhausted by it. At the end, it didn't work. I think it was fun to do like long-term partner macro deals. Like the Dale deal was really fun and like it was really good for QALO.
Incredibly profitable. Definitely a place for them. Definitely a place for macro deals. We're not saying there's not.
Yeah, but I was coming into kinship. That was like something that I just didn't want to do. So I was really intrigued by something that I'd never really had time to do, which was like the micros and knowing that influencer content did well. I was really like convinced of that, especially within ads, because I had seen it, but I had never really seen it from micros necessarily. So it was a good mix, us coming together.
I love it. Yeah, it'll be interesting because I want to talk about in maybe the next episode even, but when one of these episodes, because on my end, like I understood the power of seeding, the sense of like, obviously this is the best way to start a relationship with an influencer, right? If you just put yourself in their shoes, like there's no expectation of you to post, like I'm receiving this product. But I remember always pushing back initially on you, Cody, like everyone we were working with wants to see like ROI. They want to see what's happening from this and exactly how, and they're just like, we can't do that. We're not like, and so I was always like cringing, like, ooh, like I understand it's going to build the right relationship with these people, but are you going to scour the internet 24/7 to see who's posting what and when and trying to articulate to the client, like what type of impact it's having on their business? Like, I reflected on that will be a fun episode as well. And
for sure,
you know, what's led to today, but
it's
awesome, man. It's great to be partnering with you. I'm very fortunate and blessed. Come on.
That's right. Likewise, man. Yeah, we'll have to do a story of how we came about our seating service as well. It's good behind the scenes.
We'll have to talk about the initial. We'll have to talk about the initial runs with it too, and where we're at today with it. But it's good.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of Influencer Marketing Blueprint. If you have a question or you want some help, you can connect with Taylor or myself on Twitter and send us a direct message there. You can also find us online at kynship.co, that's kinship.co. We're here to help you create an influencer campaign that actually works and not just get likes. So we'll be back next week with more straightforward advice, and we'll see you then.